Welcome to Tale Grove, where every story grows roots, and every lesson touches the heart.
Patrick Adeyemi was known across the city as a man who had everything. At just 32 years old, he owned skyscrapers, luxury hotels, and several successful companies that stretched across the bustling streets of Lagos. Every morning, his black luxury car rolled through the city traffic while people stared in admiration. To the world, Patrick was the definition of success. But inside his magnificent mansion, where marble floors echoed every step and crystal chandeliers sparkled above empty rooms, Patrick often felt something strange: silence. A deep, uncomfortable silence. One evening, Patrick stood alone on the balcony of his penthouse, looking down at the bright city lights below. Cars moved like tiny stars across the highways, and music floated from nearby clubs and restaurants. The city was alive. Yet somehow, he felt completely alone. He sighed softly, resting his hands on the balcony railing. "Everyone smiles when they see me," he murmured to himself. "But do they really see me, or just my money?" Over the years, Patrick had met many people. Business partners praised him, strangers admired him, and many women suddenly became interested in him the moment they heard the word billionaire. But something about it never felt real. One memory kept returning to his mind. A woman he once dated had looked him straight in the eyes and said, "Patrick, I love the life you can give me." Not him. The life. That was the moment he realized something painful. People loved the wealth around him, but very few cared about the man behind it. Later that night, Patrick walked slowly through his enormous living room. Expensive paintings decorated the walls, and soft music played in the background. Yet the beauty of it all only reminded him of what was missing. Real connection. Real honesty. Real love. He sat down on a leather chair and stared at the city skyline through the giant glass windows. What if no one truly cares about me, he wondered quietly. The thought lingered in his mind like a shadow. And then, a strange idea began to form. What if he removed the one thing everyone seemed to care about? What if people met him, without the wealth, the cars, and the expensive suits? For the first time in years, Patrick felt a spark of curiosity. Maybe the only way to discover the truth about people was to become someone they would normally ignore. And that decision would soon change his life forever. The next morning, Patrick sat inside his sleek office on the top floor of his company building. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the busy streets of Lagos, where vendors shouted, taxis honked, and life moved at its usual chaotic pace. But Patrick wasn't focused on the city. His mind was somewhere else. A strange idea had been growing inside his head since the night before, and the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. Just then, the door opened and his assistant, Daniel, walked in holding a tablet. "Good morning, boss," Daniel said with his usual calm smile. "You have 3 meetings today, a charity event tonight, and—" "Cancel them," Patrick interrupted. Daniel blinked in surprise. "Cancel everything?" Patrick leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers thoughtfully on the desk. "Yes. I have something more important to do." Daniel raised an eyebrow. In the 5 years he had worked with Patrick, he had never seen him cancel an entire day of business. "What's going on?" Daniel asked carefully. Patrick stood up and walked toward the window, staring down at the crowded streets below. "Tell me something honestly," he said. "If I lost everything today, my companies, my money, my houses, how many people in my life would still stay?" Daniel hesitated. "That's a difficult question," he replied slowly. Patrick chuckled softly. "Exactly." For a moment, the room fell silent. Then Patrick turned around, his eyes sharp with determination. "I want to test people." Daniel frowned. "Test them?" "Yes," Patrick said firmly. "I'm going to disappear from this billionaire life for a while. No luxury cars, no designer suits, no bodyguards. Daniel stared at him in disbelief. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm very serious, Patrick replied. He walked back to his desk and picked up a small photo lying on it. It was a picture of him and Vanessa, the glamorous woman he had been dating for months. She says she loves me, Patrick said quietly. But I'm not sure she loves me, or what I have. Daniel crossed his arms. So what exactly is your plan? Patrick smiled slightly. I'm going to pretend to be a poor mechanic. Daniel nearly dropped his tablet. A mechanic? You? Yes, Patrick said with amusement. Grease on my hands, cheap clothes, working in a small garage. I want to see how people treat me when I'm just an ordinary man. Daniel shook his head slowly. You know this could go very wrong. Patrick shrugged. Maybe. But it could also reveal the truth. He placed the photo back on the desk and looked at it for a moment. If someone can love me when I have nothing, then I'll know it's real. Daniel sighed. Well, boss, he said reluctantly, this might be the craziest plan you've ever had. Patrick smiled confidently. Maybe, he said. But sometimes the craziest plans reveal the most honest hearts. Patrick had spent the last 2 days pretending to be someone he had never been before, a poor mechanic looking for work. The expensive suits were gone, replaced with faded jeans, worn boots, and a simple gray jacket that smelled faintly of engine oil. His luxury car was hidden far away, and in its place, he borrowed an old, broken pickup truck that rattled loudly with every bump in the road. The small neighborhood garage looked nothing like the shiny corporate buildings Patrick owned. Rusty tools hung on the walls, engines were scattered around the floor, and the smell of grease filled the air. But strangely, it felt real. Patrick stepped inside cautiously. One of the workers glanced at him and said casually, Hey man, if you're here to complain about a repair, the boss isn't here yet. Patrick shook his head. Actually, I was wondering if you guys needed another mechanic. The worker laughed. You look like you've never touched an engine in your life. Before Patrick could respond, a voice from under a car interrupted them. Don't scare away the customers, Mike. A moment later, a girl rolled out from under the car on a mechanic's creeper. Her hands were covered in grease, and a few strands of hair had escaped her ponytail. But her bright eyes and confident smile immediately caught Patrick's attention. She stood up, wiping her hands with a rag. Hi. I'm Casey, she said warmly. And don't listen to Mike. He thinks everyone is useless except himself. The workers laughed. Patrick smiled slightly. Nice to meet you. I'm Patrick. Casey looked at him curiously. So, you want to work here? She asked. Patrick nodded. Yeah. I've done some repair work before. Just looking for a chance. Casey studied him for a moment. Something about him seemed different. He spoke calmly, politely, almost too politely for someone applying to work in a small garage. But instead of judging him, she shrugged. Well, we're always short on help, she said. Let's see what you can do. She pointed toward the broken pickup truck Patrick had brought. Good news. Your first customer just arrived. Patrick blinked. That's my truck. Casey grinned. Perfect. Fix it. The workers chuckled while Patrick opened the hood nervously. Inside, Patrick's mind raced. All right, he thought. First test, survive the garage. As Casey leaned against the workbench watching him, she smiled slightly. She didn't know it yet, but the quiet man in front of her was hiding a secret big enough to change both of their lives forever. The next few days at the garage passed in a way Patrick had never experienced before. For most of his life, every moment had been scheduled, meetings, deals, conferences, business dinners. But here, time moved differently. The sound of engines starting, tools clanking against metal, and Casey's cheerful voice filled the small garage with an energy that felt strangely comforting. Patrick quickly realized that working as a mechanic was far more difficult than he had expected. His hands were constantly dirty, his back often ached from leaning over engines, and sometimes the machines simply refused to cooperate. One afternoon, Patrick struggled with a stubborn bolt under the hood of a car. He twisted the wrench harder, but it wouldn't move. "Come on," he muttered quietly. Suddenly, Casey's voice appeared behind him. "You're fighting it like it insulted your family," she joked. Patrick stepped back slightly as Casey leaned in beside him. With a quick movement, she adjusted the wrench, changed the angle, and with a single firm twist, click, the bolt loosened. Patrick stared in surprise. "How did you do that?" he asked. Casey laughed softly. "Experience. And patience." She wiped a small line of grease from her cheek with the back of her hand. "You're improving though," she added encouragingly. "Your first day, you almost dropped an entire engine part on your foot." Patrick smiled, slightly embarrassed. "I remember." Casey leaned against the car, folding her arms. "So tell me something," she said curiously. "You don't really seem like a mechanic." Patrick's heart skipped for a second. "What makes you say that?" he asked carefully. Casey shrugged. "I don't know, the way you talk. The way you think before answering. It's like you're hiding a whole different life somewhere." Patrick looked down at the floor for a moment. In a way, she wasn't wrong. But instead of answering directly, he simply said, "Everyone has a story they're not ready to tell yet." Casey studied his face for a moment, then smiled kindly. "Fair enough." There was no pressure in her voice. No suspicion. Just simple understanding. For Patrick, that was something rare. Most people in his real life were always trying to gain something from him: money, influence, opportunity. But Casey didn't want anything. Later that evening, as they closed the garage, Casey handed Patrick a cold soda. "Good work today," she said. "You survived another day without breaking anything important." Patrick laughed. Standing there in the quiet garage, holding a simple drink after a long day of honest work, Patrick felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. And without realizing it, the friendship between the billionaire pretending to be poor, and the hard-working mechanic girl, had quietly begun. Days turned into weeks, and what started as a simple work arrangement began to change in ways Patrick hadn't expected. Each morning, he would arrive at the small garage feeling a strange excitement, an eagerness to see Casey. It wasn't just her skill with cars that drew him in anymore, but her laughter, her courage, the way she treated everyone around her with honesty and kindness. She was nothing like the women Patrick was used to in his world of luxury: genuine, strong, and fearless. One late afternoon, the sun dipped low, casting a golden glow through the dusty garage windows. Patrick was helping Casey push a stubborn car out of the bay when they both paused, breathing heavily from the effort. "You're stronger than you look," Casey said, a teasing smile on her face. Patrick laughed softly, wiping sweat from his brow. "And you're more intimidating than I expected," he admitted, his voice quieter than usual. Casey raised an eyebrow, leaning casually against the car. "Intimidating? Me? I think you're just scared you might actually like working with me." Patrick froze for a moment, caught off guard. Like her? He thought. The truth was undeniable. He enjoyed every second with her, the easy conversation, the teasing, the small moments where they shared laughter over grease stains and misbehaving engines. And worse, he found himself thinking about her even after leaving the garage. I think I enjoy being here," he said slowly, almost to himself. Casey tilted her head, curiosity sparkling in her eyes. "Enjoy being here? You mean, at the garage?" Patrick nodded, glancing away. "It's different. Real. You make it feel alive." Casey's expression softened. She walked closer, her hands brushing lightly against the hood of the car. "You know, Patrick. I didn't expect a stranger to come here and stick around. Most people wouldn't even try." He looked into her eyes, feeling a strange pull in his chest. "I'm not most people," he whispered, though a part of him wondered if she would understand. There was a silence that hung between them, heavy but comforting. The sun dipped lower, and the warm light reflected off the cars, casting shadows that seemed to wrap around them. Patrick's heart raced. He wanted to tell her the truth, but he couldn't. Not yet. Yet with every smile she gave him, every playful remark, every moment of shared laughter, Patrick realized something terrifying and exhilarating: he was falling in love. And he wasn't sure if he could ever hide it. For Casey, there was a softness in Patrick she hadn't noticed before. The way he watched her, listened, and genuinely cared, it made her chest tighten in a way she hadn't expected. She was beginning to feel something she had promised herself she wouldn't, something that could complicate everything, yet also felt impossibly right. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by engines and sunlight, both of them felt it, their hearts quietly pulling closer, even before words could admit the truth. Patrick had been carrying a secret for weeks, a truth he had never revealed to anyone, not his friends, not his family, not even Casey. Every time he thought about telling her, fear gripped him. What if she felt betrayed? What if she laughed or walked away? But the longer he waited, the heavier the weight on his chest became. Tonight, he knew it had to end. He waited for Casey at the garage, the quiet hum of the fluorescent lights buzzing above. She arrived just as the sun was setting, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, a streak of grease on her cheek. She looked at him curiously. "Hey," she said softly. "You wanted to see me?" Patrick took a deep breath, trying to steady his voice. "Casey, there's something I need to tell you. Something important." Casey frowned slightly, sensing the seriousness in his tone. "Okay, what is it?" Patrick hesitated, then stepped closer, his eyes locking with hers. "I haven't been honest with you, about who I really am." Casey blinked, confusion spreading across her face. "What do you mean?" He swallowed, the words tasting heavy on his tongue. "I'm not just a mechanic. I've been pretending. I'm actually Patrick. I own the company that builds the cars we're working on. I'm a billionaire." For a moment, Casey froze, her wrench clattering to the floor. Her eyes widened, and she stepped back, disbelief etched into her face. "You, what? You're lying, right? This is some kind of joke." Patrick shook his head, his voice steady but gentle. "No joke. I wanted to know if you would like me, for me, not my money. I wanted to see if your heart was real." Casey's mind raced. She felt a mixture of anger, betrayal, and shock. "All this time, you were lying to me. Everything, all those days, your smiles, your hard work, it was all an act." Patrick's shoulders slumped slightly. "I know it sounds terrible, and I never wanted to hurt you. But everything I've felt for you, that's real. The feelings, the laughter, the friendship. That was never fake." Casey stared at him, the tension thick between them. Her heart was pounding, her mind spinning. Part of her wanted to run, to shout, to throw the truth back at him. But another part, the part that had laughed with him, leaned on him, and felt alive in his presence, wanted to believe him. Patrick reached out slowly, his hand hovering near hers. "I don't want to lose you, Casey. I'm willing to risk everything if you'll just hear me out." Casey's chest tightened. The garage felt smaller now, the world outside fading. She could feel the weight of the truth pressing against her, and in that moment, she realized something terrifying and thrilling at the same time. The man in front of her, the liar, the billionaire, the stranger, had somehow become the person she couldn't stop thinking about. And for the first time, she wasn't sure if she could let him go. Casey's heart raced as Patrick's words hung in the air. She wanted to believe him, to reach out and close the distance between them, but a storm of emotions swirled inside her. Betrayal, confusion, and hurt pressed down on her chest. Every smile, every shared laugh now felt tainted by the truth she had just uncovered. He had lied to her for weeks, and though his reasons sounded sincere, she wasn't sure she could trust him again. I can't, Casey whispered, her voice trembling. She stepped back, distancing herself from him, though every fiber of her being ached to stay. I don't know who you really are anymore, Patrick. Maybe I never did. Patrick's brow furrowed, his hand reaching toward her. Casey, please. I didn't lie to hurt you. I did this because I wanted to know. I wanted to see the real you. The woman behind the laugh, behind the grease, behind the walls. Don't walk away from this. Her eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head firmly. I need time, Patrick. Time to think. Time to understand how someone I trusted could pretend to be this other person. Her chest tightened with the weight of her decision, but she forced herself to continue. I can't just pretend it didn't happen. I can't just forget the betrayal and smile like everything's fine. Not yet. Patrick stepped closer, desperation creeping into his voice. Casey, I care about you. What we have, it's real. Please don't leave like this. I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust again. Casey's gaze dropped to the floor. The wrench in her hand felt heavy, symbolic of the burden she carried. I can't, Patrick. I need to walk away before I lose myself in someone I don't fully know. You're different from the man I thought you were. And right now, I need to find myself before I can ever find us. Patrick's shoulders slumped, a painful mix of regret and longing in his eyes. I understand, he said quietly, though the words felt hollow even to him. But I'll wait. No matter how long it takes, I'll wait for you. Casey took a deep, shuddering breath, and without another word, she turned and walked toward the garage door. Each step felt heavier than the last, each one a battle between her heart and her mind. Patrick watched, rooted to the spot, his chest tight, knowing he had lost her for now, but unwilling to give up hope entirely. As Casey disappeared into the fading sunlight, the garage felt emptier than ever. The laughter, the teasing, the growing warmth between them, all gone, replaced by silence and the echo of what could have been. Patrick clenched his fists, whispering to himself, I won't let this be the end. I can't. Casey glanced over her shoulder once, her tears glistening in the late afternoon light. She didn't know if she would return, but for now, she needed to walk away, leaving behind a piece of her heart with the man who had changed everything. Patrick sat alone in his penthouse that night, the city lights casting long shadows across the room. The laughter, the teasing, the warmth of Casey's presence, it all seemed so distant now. He replayed the last moments he had seen her, her back turned as she walked away, tears glinting in the fading sunlight. Every word she had said echoed in his mind, I need time. I need to find myself. For the first time in his life, Patrick felt powerless. He was used to controlling situations, bending circumstances to his will, and yet here was someone who had slipped through his fingers simply because he had underestimated the impact of honesty and trust. He thought of the facade he had created, the poor mechanic, the test to measure loyalty, and realized with a pang of guilt how wrong he had been. Casey had trusted him, and he had played a game with her heart. He picked up his phone but hesitated, fingers hovering over her contact. What if I call? What if I push too hard and lose her forever? He clenched his jaw, frustration and regret mixing in a bitter swirl. Then, his mother's voice came to him, not her actual voice, but the wisdom she had imparted over years of guidance. Son, love isn't a game. True love is worth waiting for, worth being honest for. The words hit him harder than he expected. Patrick leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling, memories of Casey flooding his mind, the way she had laughed when a car broke down, the way her eyes sparkled when she told the truth even when it was hard, the moments of silence that spoke louder than any words. She wasn't just a fling or a temporary distraction, she was someone who had shifted the axis of his life without even trying. He felt a tear slide down his cheek, a rare moment of vulnerability for a man who had always projected confidence and control. I can't let her go. Not like this. Not after everything. Patrick knew he needed guidance, so he called his mother. When she picked up, her calm, steady voice filled him with comfort. Mama, I think I've lost her. Casey, she walked away, and I don't know how to fix it. Patrick's mother listened patiently, then said firmly, son, you've realized your mistake. That's the first step. Now, you need to be honest, truly honest. Don't play games, don't hide behind tests. Tell her exactly how you feel, and be ready to wait. She's worth it. Patrick nodded, even though she couldn't see him. I understand, Mama. I need to do this right. I won't let her go this time. He hung up and stared out at the skyline, a fire lighting in his chest. The game was over, and there was no turning back. He didn't just want Casey, he needed her, and this time, he was ready to prove that love, honesty, and patience were worth far more than any plan, any test, or any game. Patrick whispered to himself, almost as a vow, I'll find her. And I'll make sure she knows, she's the only one I want. Patrick drove through the familiar streets of the city, his heart pounding in rhythm with every passing light. He had spent days thinking, planning, and wrestling with the weight of his mistakes, and now, he finally knew there was only one thing that mattered, finding Casey. The garage where it had all begun was his destination, but more than the place, it was the hope that she was still there, that he could make things right. When he arrived, the sight of her brought a rush of memories, the grease-stained overalls, the laughter echoing through the workshop, the way she had never been afraid to speak her mind. Patrick's chest tightened, and he stepped forward, calling softly, Casey. She looked up from under the hood of an old car, surprise flashing across her face. For a moment, neither of them moved. Time seemed to pause, the noise of the city fading into the background. Casey's hands trembled slightly as she wiped them on a rag, unsure if this was real or just another trick. Patrick, however, held her gaze, unwavering, his voice filled with sincerity. Casey, he began, but she held up a hand. Patrick. I don't know if I can trust you again, she said, her voice soft but guarded. Her eyes glimmered with emotion, and she stepped back instinctively, unsure if stepping forward was even safe for her heart. Patrick's heart ached at her hesitation. He took a deep breath, moving a step closer, lowering his voice to a whisper meant only for her. I don't expect everything to be perfect, and I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I want you to know. I've realized something. You're the person I can't live without. You're not just part of my life, you are my life. Tears welled up in Casey's eyes. She had spent weeks trying to forget, trying to convince herself she was better off alone, yet hearing Patrick speak so openly and honestly broke through her defenses. Patrick. I was so hurt, she admitted, her voice catching. I didn't know if you were real, if real. He stepped closer, closing the distance between them, and gently took her hands in his. Everything is real, Casey. The laughs, the moments we shared, and the feelings that grew between us, all of it. And I'm not letting you walk away again. A faint smile broke through Casey's tears, and her heart fluttered at his words. Slowly, she let herself lean into him, the walls she had built around her heart crumbling. The garage, once a place of tests and games, now felt like the beginning of something genuine, something unbreakable. Patrick whispered softly, I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. Casey's eyes shimmered with hope as she whispered back, I believe you. Patrick. I really do. In that moment, surrounded by the smell of motor oil and the fading sunlight through the windows, they both realized that love, honesty, and second chances could mend even the deepest wounds. Their hearts, once distant and guarded, now beat together in perfect harmony, ready to face the world side by side. The sun had begun to set over the city, painting the skyline in shades of gold and crimson. Patrick and Casey sat together on the balcony of his penthouse, the soft evening breeze carrying with it the faint hum of life below. There was a quiet contentment in the air, a sense of resolution that neither had felt in months. The trials they had faced, the lies, the misunderstandings, the fear, and the heartbreak, had all led them here, to this fragile but beautiful peace. Patrick turned to Casey, his eyes warm and steady. "You know," he began, a soft smile on his face, "I used to think that wealth could solve everything, that money could buy happiness, trust, even love. But the truth is, none of it matters without someone who sees you for who you really are." Casey's hands found his, fingers intertwining. "I used to think I had to face the world alone, that I couldn't depend on anyone, but you showed me that trust and honesty can make even the heaviest burdens lighter." She paused, her eyes glistening with emotion. "And that even a life I thought was ordinary, can be extraordinary when shared with the right person." The narrator's voice drifted in, guiding the audience through the lesson woven into their story. Life often tests us with deception, pride, and fear. But true love and genuine connection aren't found in grand gestures or hidden riches, they are found in honesty, courage, and the willingness to take a chance on someone who truly cares. Patrick and Casey's journey reminds us that every challenge carries a lesson, and every heartbreak has the power to lead us to something greater if we listen to our hearts. Patrick leaned closer, brushing a strand of hair from Casey's face, his voice tender but certain. "We've both made mistakes. I tested you, and I lied, but I've learned that love isn't about games or proving loyalty. It's about being real, being present, and never taking each other for granted." Casey rested her head on his shoulder, her voice barely a whisper, "And I've learned that opening your heart, even when it's scary, can bring the kind of happiness you never imagined." Together, they watched the sun dip below the horizon, the city lights flickering on like tiny stars coming to life. In that moment, they understood that the trials they had faced were not just obstacles, they were teachers. They had grown stronger, wiser, and more appreciative of the true gifts of life, love, trust, and the people who stand by you through it all. The narrator concluded softly, and so, in the end, Patrick and Casey's story isn't just about romance or drama. It's about discovering that life's most valuable treasures aren't measured in wealth or status, but in the courage to love honestly, forgive openly, and embrace every second of the journey together. As they held each other, the city below sparkling like a universe of possibilities, it was clear, their hearts, once tested and scarred, were now whole, and the lessons of life had led them to the most beautiful ending of all.